Are you ready for an unforgettable adventure in the far reaches of space? In this story, we'll witness an impossible bond between two skilled operatives from completely different worlds, and how a dangerous mission suddenly changes their lives forever. Imagine sneaking into a hidden fortress teeming with armed smugglers, where one wrong move could mean capture or worse. Yet, amid pulse-pounding escapes and electrifying storms, the most astonishing development isn't just the successful infiltration, it's the revelation that a human and a Chiral scout are expecting a hybrid family. Curious about how it all unfolds? Stick around and listen to the entire story to discover how these unlikely partners navigate treacherous terrain, secret plots, and the wonders of starting a brand new life together. And if you enjoy tales packed with action, intrigue, and heart, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you even more captivating stories. Orion Dex shifted in his cramped seat, eyes discreetly flicking toward his new partner at the helm of the small reconnaissance vessel. His mission briefing had offered little insight into what to expect from a member of the Chiral species. He had been told only that the Chiral were prized for their exceptional senses and agility, often serving as frontier scouts or covert operatives. But upon meeting Zelina for the first time, Orion had realized that every rumor he'd heard about the Chiral paled compared to the reality. She was tall and lithe, with soft, downy fur on her ears and a luxuriously brushing tail that moved in sinuous arcs across the pilot seat. Framed by a sleek curtain of copper-red hair, her face possessed both a fierce, predatory edge and a refined grace that seemed both alien and strangely captivating. He was so absorbed in his silent admiration that he almost didn't hear her soft voice. "You're staring again, human," Zelina said without turning her head. She deftly tapped the ship's navigation controls, navigating a region of unpredictable asteroid debris. Her ears twitched, signaling a heightened awareness of her surroundings. "That's the third time in the last 10 minutes. If you're going to continue, at least come up with an excuse that's more creative than 'I'm studying your flight technique.'" Orion felt the heat rise to his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he replied, clearing his throat in embarrassment. "I haven't encountered many Chiral in my career. The way you pilot the ship is, mesmerizing. Very smooth." He saw the faintest curve of a smile tug at the corners of her lips. "I've heard humans find us intriguing, and sometimes a bit unnerving." Her glimmering golden eyes turned in his direction for the briefest moment. "I guess you're confirming that rumor for me." "Well, I'm not exactly an example of poise when it comes to first impressions," he admitted. "I just find your skill exceptional. The brief told me you'd be a sharp navigator, but it didn't do justice to the reality." Zelina's tail flicked, the tuft at the end curling slightly. "We Chiral pride ourselves on subtlety. We don't barrel our way through obstacles. We prefer to sense a problem and navigate around it, which is exactly what we'll need to do once we arrive at our target." She tapped a screen that displayed a cluster of planetoids in the distance. "We've got a lead on a ring of smugglers operating from an old mining complex near one of these moons. Intelligence suggests they're trafficking stolen tech. Our job, gather concrete proof before the authorities move in." Orion nodded. "Understood. And I appreciate your approach. Better to avoid a fight than rush into one unprepared." Zelina paused momentarily, her large ears swiveling to pick up the hum of the engines. "We'll see if you keep that perspective once things get dicey," she said. "I've worked with humans who were all too eager to test their mettle in direct combat." "Trust me," Orion remarked dryly. "I'm not about to rush into a gunfight unless it's absolutely necessary. I'm the thinking type. At least I like to believe so." He stared at the moon they were approaching, a rocky, pock-marked sphere with swirling dust clouds visible even from orbit. "We'll have plenty of time to test each other's methods once we land." Zelina's eyes returned to her instruments, but he noticed an almost imperceptible flick of her tail against the chair. "I look forward to seeing if human caution and Chiral finesse can meld into something effective. Let's hope you don't disappoint, Orion Dex." Her subtle smile lingered in the cockpit's quiet hum. The scout vessel glided through the moon's thin upper atmosphere. Outside the reinforced viewport, wisps of reddish dust curled like serpents in the hazy twilight. Zelina carefully guided the craft into a wide canyon, its jagged walls streaked with reflective minerals that disrupted standard sensor readings, an ideal hiding place for smugglers and other unsavory types. Although the intelligence on the ground installation was fragmentary, they were certain there was illicit activity happening here, likely hidden deep within the labyrinth of ridges and rock formations. Zelina slowed the craft's speed and engaged a landing sequence. "The data indicates we can mask our signature if we hug the terrain," she said, tapping a small display to show Orion the relative topography. "There's a narrow valley a few kilometers from our suspected target site that should provide cover." Orion's gaze traced the lines on the holographic topographical map she projected. "We'll need to set down in a spot that keeps the ship out of direct scanning range, but not too far from the infiltration route," he agreed, mentally running the calculations. "With luck, we can approach on foot, confirm the presence of the smugglers, and get out without a firefight." "Luck is for those who don't trust their own instincts," Zelina said quietly. Her ears snapped upright as she watched the readouts. "We create our own fortune by being prepared." As if on cue, a small alarm pinged on her console. She let out a low hiss, smoothing the fur on her arms reflexively. "Looks like we're already picking up energy signatures near the southwestern ridge. They're faint, but consistent with industrial equipment, possibly mining gear or power generators. Could be for the smugglers' covert operations." Orion leaned in, studying the readout. "I see it. 3 separate hotspots, enough to suggest a perimeter fence or some form of advanced sensor net." He shook his head thoughtfully. "We'll have to disable or evade those if we want to get any closer." "Evade," Zelina echoed, setting the craft down with a gentle thump on the canyon floor. "If we power down entirely, we can maintain a low-profile approach. Then, once we're on foot, my Chiral senses can guide us around whatever security measures they've got." He raised an eyebrow. "That's what the briefing said, that Chiral can detect things even advanced instruments miss. Heat variations, subtle vibrations, the faintest hum of electronics. It sounds almost supernatural to me." "It's not magic," she replied with a slight scoff, her tail flicking in mild amusement. "It's just an evolved physiology. In the wild, Chiral had to survive by being hyper-aware. We rely on it in modern times for espionage and scouting. Let's see if it keeps both of us alive." Zelina completed the shutdown sequence. The engine noise dwindled to a soft drone before ceasing altogether. Outside, the only sounds were a distant wind slicing through the canyon walls and the odd clatter of settling rocks. Orion grabbed his gear, a standard-issue pulse pistol, a portable scanning device, and a pack of infiltration tools. Zelina took a smaller sidearm and a custom sensor kit that she strapped to her belt, her movements graceful and assured. Orion swallowed the knot in his throat. He tried to recall the last time he'd felt this mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Maybe on that ill-fated mission near the Verge asteroid belt, or perhaps during his academy days, back when fieldwork was just a promise on the horizon rather than daily reality. Now, with Zelina at his side, it felt different. The stakes were higher, partly because the Chiral were known for their near-flawless recon successes, and partly because he sensed something intangible about Zelina, something beyond mere skill. Or maybe he was just overwhelmed by the allure of a mysterious alien partner. He stepped off the craft and felt the crunch of gritty, Mars-hued dust under his boots. The atmosphere was breathable, though thin, a courtesy of advanced terraforming that had only partially succeeded. Overhead, the sky was an otherworldly swirl of oranges and browns, with a hint of cosmic starlight peeking through the gloom. Zelina inhaled deeply, her ears rotating to listen for the subtlest of sounds. "Let's move," she said in a soft command, forging ahead with a poised stride. Orion followed, the hush of the alien environment wrapping around them like a warning and a promise. Though they were only minutes into their trek, Orion felt an unsettling awareness that they were small intruders in a sprawling, uncharted land. The canyon's towering walls arched overhead, riddled with crevices that glinted with metallic ore, evidence of the geological oddities that had once lured legitimate miners. Now, it seemed, these hidden riches had become a backdrop for clandestine smugglers. Zelina led the way. Orion noted how her gait shifted fluidly, her footsteps nearly silent against the rough ground. Whenever she paused, it was not arbitrary. She would raise her muzzle slightly, ears trained forward, sniffing for subtle changes in the air currents, or listening for mechanical vibrations no human ear could detect. After each pause, she'd offer a nod or a low murmur of clear, and they'd continue. The mission specs had described her people's senses as remarkable, but seeing it in action was altogether enthralling. Occasionally, he tried using his portable scanner, but it hummed and coughed with interference. "This mineral composition is messing up my readings," he muttered in frustration as the device spat out static-laden data. "At this rate, your senses are our best bet." Zelina flashed him a smirk, although her eyes remained sharp and vigilant. "You sound surprised. I thought you said you knew how extraordinary Kyrell were." He offered a slight shrug. "Intellectually, yes, but experiencing it is another story. I'm impressed." "Flattery acknowledged," she said dryly, then turned her gaze ahead. "We should veer left at the next fork in the canyon. I'm picking up vibrations from a large engine or generator to the right. If we can circle around, we might see where they're directing that power." They proceeded quietly, weaving between jagged outcroppings. Even though they were on high alert, Orion couldn't ignore a growing fascination with Zelina herself. He wouldn't call it mere attraction. There was an inherent grace and calm about her, a confidence that every sense she possessed was telling her something crucial about her environment. It was a feeling of synergy, like they were pieces of a puzzle that fit in unpredictable ways. The silence broke when Zelina lifted her hand in a sharp gesture to stop. Orion froze, scanning the near distance for threats. Then he heard it, an engine's dull rumble, just audible enough for his human ears to catch. Zelina gestured for Orion to press himself against the canyon wall, and she followed suit. In slow, controlled movements, she crept forward to peer around a protruding boulder. After a breathless pause, she retreated to Orion's side, her voice low. "There's a hover truck convoy down there, heavily armed. 4 vehicles, 2 appear to be hauling cargo containers. They look unmarked, no official insignia. Guards are armed with rifles." She paused, tail swishing in agitation. "We need to find out where they're going. Could be an entrance or a concealed structure." Orion nodded, sliding out a small camera drone by them. "I can launch this to get a vantage from above, but it's risky if they have jammers." Zelina's ears flattened a bit, a sign of caution. "Let's try a less direct route first. Perhaps we can scale that ridge. If we keep the wind at our backs, my sense of smell should pick up any other patrols. I want to avoid direct confrontation unless it's absolutely necessary." He exhaled and relaxed the tension in his shoulders. "Understood. Lead the way. I'll cover you." She dipped her head in acknowledgement and guided him further up the canyon's side path, every step deliberate and quiet. Orion wondered if she could hear how loud his heart was pounding, and if she interpreted it merely as mission adrenaline or something else entirely. 15 minutes later, they were perched on a ledge overlooking a wide clearing in the canyon. The clearing was partially shielded by the curving walls of rock, but from their elevated vantage, Orion and Zelina had a prime view of the operation below. One of the hover trucks had pulled up beside a reinforced gate set into the canyon wall, a structure that was almost invisible at ground level. A hidden entrance, precisely what they had suspected. Dull lights flickered above it, and Orion could see uniformed figures, likely hired guns, directing the trucks inside. Zelina silently nudged Orion, pointing to a small cluster of workers transferring crates. Through the scope on his infiltration visor, Orion noticed the crates bore the faint stenciling of a major tech conglomerate, definitely stolen goods. The crew was methodical, no rush, suggesting they felt safe here. This was their territory. As they conducted surveillance, a gust of wind kicked up dust, forcing them to shift positions. Zelina's tail brushed against Orion's leg as she scooted nearer to share a partial rock cover. He tensed momentarily at the contact, an innocent movement, but one that made him acutely aware of her presence. Her furred ear twitched toward him, a sign she'd noticed the slight reaction. She offered the smallest smile, though her voice was all business. "If we can get a recording of them offloading this contraband, plus a read on their inside facility, that might be enough for a strike team to move in. We just need proof. Let me see your camera drone." Orion handed over the palm-sized device. Zelina traced a claw tip along its edges, accessing a maintenance panel. I can modify its power signature to match the ambient environment. That should reduce the chance of detection, although if they have advanced sensors, it'll be a race against time. In hushed concentration, she adjusted the drone's internal calibrations. As she worked, Orion again found himself entranced by her dexterity and calm focus. If she sensed him watching, she gave no indication, until she handed the drone back and caught him with a direct look. "All set," she said softly. He cleared his throat. "Right, I'll pilot it from here. Just say when." Zelina shifted slightly, glancing over the ledge. "Launch on my mark." She waited for a patrol unit to pass before giving him a subtle nod. With practiced skill, Orion activated the drone, letting it slip off the ledge and into the murky air. The device was silent, floating in gentle arcs as Orion guided it around the perimeter of the hidden gate. They watched the small display on Orion's portable console. Images flickered into focus. Cargo containers stacked against a rock wall, armed guards patrolling catwalks near the concealed entry, and a large mechanical turret perched discreetly behind a canyon outcropping, covering the approach. That turret alone could wreak havoc on any assault team. Zelina's eyes narrowed. They've established quite a fortress. This is more than a simple smuggling ring. It's a full-scale operation with formidable defenses. No wonder intelligence has been circling around them without moving in. Either they're extremely well-funded or they're funneling goods into something bigger, Orion added. His mind clicked through strategic angles, but the turret complicated every approach. "We're going to need crystal-clear evidence to justify bringing in heavier forces." Zelina nodded, her ears twitching attentively. "Let's record a few more angles, then retrieve the drone. We can't risk an extended flight or we'll tip them off." A sudden beep on the console indicated a spike in electromagnetic activity. Zelina stiffened. "Pull it back now, their sensors are active." Orion executed a swift recall, praying the drone hadn't been flagged. The small device skimmed over the canyon edge, returning to their ledge a moment later. She exhaled with relief, then studied the sky above. "We need to regroup. We've got what we came for, at least preliminarily. Next step is infiltration, but not tonight. Our next move is to find a vantage point to camp until we can sabotage that turret or jam their sensors." "Agreed," Orion said, powering down the drone. "We'll come back under better cover, perhaps after nightfall or during a meteor shower if we're lucky. We might be able to slip in unseen." With the data they'd gathered, their immediate task was complete, but an uneasy sensation lingered in the air. Neither spoke of it yet, but both could sense that storms, literal or metaphorical, often followed such hush before the mission's crescendo. Zelina and Orion planned to circle back to their ship, intending to establish a temporary base of operations and analyze the footage in greater detail. But as they made their descent along a winding path through the canyon, the twilight sky began to surge with ominous electric streaks. A low rumble echoed between the rock walls, and Zelina's ears pinned back in alarm. She halted, raising a hand to silence Orion. "Feel that in the air?" she murmured. Her fur seemed to bristle as she took a deep breath. "That's an electromagnetic storm forming, and it's coming fast." Orion inhaled sharply. Even without heightened senses, he could detect a static charge prickling his skin. "Our shuttle is nearly 2 kilometers away," he said, glancing nervously at the swirling clouds overhead. "If this storm hits at full strength, it could short-circuit our systems, possibly fry every piece of electronics we have." Zelina's eyes narrowed, scanning the terrain. "We won't make it back in time to properly shield the ship. We need immediate shelter, someplace with natural mineral deposits thick enough to block or dampen the storm's energy spikes." "Like a cave?" "Exactly," she confirmed, nodding firmly. "I spotted some caverns on our approach route. With any luck, we can reach them before the worst hits." A bright flash tore across the darkening sky, accompanied by a thunderous roar that shook small stones loose from the canyon walls. Orion felt the ground tremble beneath his boots. "Lead the way," he said, swallowing his fear. "I'll follow your instincts." They broke into a brisk jog, mindful not to stir the attention of any smugglers patrolling nearby. The wind began to pick up, lashing grains of sand across their faces. Zelina hissed in discomfort but pressed forward, guided by an internal compass Orion could only marvel at. After several tense minutes, the narrow path gave way to a rock shelf. The silhouette of an opening, perhaps a grotto or natural tunnel, revealed itself through swirling dust. "In there!" Zelina shouted above the rising wind. She clambered over a small boulder, motioning for Orion to follow. Her tail flicked anxiously behind her as she gazed back at the roiling sky. They had no time to lose. The space inside was barely large enough for two people to move without brushing each other, but it extended deeper into the stone. Zelina immediately led them further in, away from the entrance, to ensure maximum protection from the storm's wrath. When Orion finally dropped his gear and sank against the wall, he could hear his own breathing pounding in his ears. Outside, lightning cracked again, even louder. The cave mouth flickered with an eerie glow, showing glimpses of swirling dust clouds and lashing winds. He wiped his brow. "That was too close," he managed. "Hopefully our ship's hull can handle the brunt of the storm. We might be stranded if the systems get fried." Zelina crouched to examine some of the smooth mineral deposits on the walls. "The readings of this composition suggest it'll insulate us well enough." "That's the good news," she said quietly. "The bad news is these storms can last for days. We may be here a while, especially if the electronics are compromised." Her eyes lifted to meet his in the dim light. "You don't have claustrophobia, do you?" Orion shook his head. "No, but this is definitely not how I pictured the mission would end up." Her expression softened. "We'll manage, Orion," she said, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "Corell are used to improvising in hostile environments, and you humans have a reputation for perseverance." He nodded, feeling the heat of her palm even through his sleeve. "I guess we get to see just how adaptable we both are." They moved deeper into the cavern, guided by faint luminescence from a cluster of crystalline deposits. A gentle glow emanated from these formations, casting the stone walls in ghostly shades of violet and blue. While small, it was enough to keep them from fumbling in total darkness. Orion marveled at the natural beauty, swirling patterns etched by ancient water flows and shimmering mineral facets that seemed to hum softly. Zelina began setting up a makeshift camp near a relatively flat ledge. She carefully arranged a ground sheet and then gestured for Orion to sit and remove any external gear that might be damaged by stray electric surges. He complied, laying aside his scanning device, pistol, and communication unit. "We should conserve battery life," Zelina noted, switching off any unessential electronics, "and we must check them periodically to see if the storm's electromagnetic interference subsides." Orion nodded, settling against the rock. He rolled his shoulders, trying to ease the tension. "If it gets too cold, we'll need a heat source. Any chance these crystals emit any warmth?" Zelina placed a hand near the closest formation. "Mild warmth, maybe, but not enough to keep our body temperature stable if the temperature drops further. If that happens, we'll use body heat, basic survival technique. I've got an emergency thermal blanket in my pack, but it might not work reliably if the storm intensifies." He gave a tentative smile. "Then body heat it is. Not complaining so long as you don't mind sharing." She flicked her tail with a hint of teasing. "Trust me, humans aren't the only ones who appreciate warmth, but let's see how the night progresses before we jump to that." Lightning exploded outside, the flash visible all the way into their cave. A second later, a thunderous boom shook the ground. Zelina winced, flattening her ears against her head. "That is intense." "You all right?" She exhaled. "It's just the noise. Corell hearing is sensitive. Nothing I can't handle." Despite her bravado, he could see how tightly she held her jaw. He shifted closer, offering an earplug kit from his belt. "Here, I carry these for training sessions when the range gets loud. Not sure they'll fit perfectly, but it's worth a try." Her gaze flickered with appreciation, and she accepted the kit, adjusting the small plugs to fit her ear canals. "Thank you," she said. "Better." For a moment, they settled into silence, the two of them listening to the storm rage beyond the cave's stony barrier. Orion felt an odd sense of closeness blossoming between them, a camaraderie forged by circumstance, but also something more personal. He caught himself wondering if she sensed it too. At length, Zelina retrieved a ration pack from her satchel. She tore it open with a small claw and offered half to Orion. "We might as well eat. And talk strategy, maybe. We need to figure out how to sabotage that turret. Our intel won't help much if the smugglers blast any approaching strike team to atoms." Orion accepted the food, the faint odor of seasoned protein wafting up. Agreed. Once the storm passes, we can see what gear is functional. Worst case, we attempt a stealth infiltration. Maybe place a small explosive on the turret's power coupling. Zelina smirked. You humans do have a knack for big, loud solutions. Let's brainstorm something more subtle, too, just in case we can't get that close physically. My sensor kit might be able to jam its targeting array from a distance. They shared a quiet meal, each reflective in their own way. Occasionally, they exchanged fleeting glances, puzzled, perhaps, by the dawning realization that this enforced proximity was pulling them closer than any standard mission ever would. As the hours stretched into the deeper night, the cave settled into a steady rhythm. Thunder boomed intermittently, but the intensity of the lightning showed little sign of abating. Orion and Zelina found themselves moving from stilted small talk about infiltration plans to more personal topics, an evolution prompted by the oppressive closeness of the environment and the unspoken acknowledgement that they were stuck here until nature relented. Zelina described aspects of Kyrell culture Orion had never known. She spoke about the clan-based social structures on her homeworld, how each extended family claimed territories in lush forests, learning from a young age to hunt and scout using their acute senses. She recounted how the earliest Kyrell had formed alliances across star systems by demonstrating their reliability in covert operations and frontier exploration. Orion shared stories from his academy years, describing the mentors who had guided him in the near disasters he'd narrowly avoided during training. He recalled the time he'd almost washed out of a zero-gravity infiltration course, only to scramble his way back in by finding an unorthodox solution to a sealed airlock puzzle. His irreverent sense of humor and knack for bending rules made him a bit of a legend, and occasionally a headache for his superiors. Zelina listened with a tilted head, her eyes glowing faintly in the crystal-lit darkness. "So you're stubborn and inventive," she summarized, her tone carrying an undercurrent of admiration. "You might make a decent Kyrell." He huffed a soft laugh. "High praise. I'll take it." Eventually, the temperature dropped further, and a biting chill crept in from outside. They used the emergency blanket Zelina had, but it offered limited relief against the encroaching cold. Without much deliberation, they ended up seated side by side, shoulders touching. She pulled part of the blanket around him, and he tucked his arms around her to hold it in place. The arrangement was more intimate than any typical field mission scenario, but practicality left them little choice. Even so, an electric current of awareness passed between them. Orion's breath hitched slightly when she shifted, pressing closer against his chest. He tried to focus on the storm's distant growl, on the flickering crystals, on anything but the softness of her fur or the warmth radiating from her body. "You're tense," she murmured at length, her ear flicking toward his face. "Is it the cold?" "Partly," he replied, exhaling slowly. "And partly just this situation. Being forced into such close quarters with you, Zelina, He paused, unsure how to phrase his thoughts. "I don't want to make things awkward." "Awkward?" She turned her head slightly, allowing their gazes to meet. "Orion, you're not the only one feeling something. The storm's not the only thing sparking energy here." He felt the tension in his neck ease, replaced by a surge of warmth that wasn't purely physical. "So it's not just me." A soft trill that was almost like a purr slipped from her throat. "Kyrell have a keen sense for emotional shifts. Your pulse, your scent, they're telling me plenty. And my instincts," she hesitated, then continued, "my instincts say we're on the edge of something that might be bigger than a mere mission partnership." Outside, another roll of thunder crashed, as if echoing her words. Orion swallowed, heart pounding. "We have to be careful," he managed, though the statement felt half-hearted. "We're still on an operation, stuck in a cave we only entered out of necessity." Caution, yes. Denial, no. She slowly slid her hand up his arm. In Kyrell lore, storms are turning points. They wash away old certainties, forging new bonds among survivors. Maybe this is our storm, forging something between us. He brushed his thumb over her cheek, enthralled by the softness of her fur there. "Then let's not run from it," he whispered. Lightning flashed again, and their surroundings lit up in a stark, momentary glow. He could see the reflection in her eyes, could feel the unspoken question lingering between them. "Do we explore this? Do we dare break protocol for something that feels so undeniably real? Zelina answered by leaning in, her lips brushing his in a tentative, electric moment. The tension snapped, replaced by a rush of warmth, a blend of curiosity and relief. The storm raged on, but within the protective womb of the cavern, it was as though they'd discovered their own surge of life amid chaos. Their first kiss was soft and slow, an exploration of connection rather than a desperate scramble. The complexities of interspecies norms, of ranks, of mission protocols, everything faded into the background. For now, they were simply two beings caught in nature's fury, finding solace in a spark that they both sensed could become a roaring flame. When they finally parted, the storm outside still thundered, but inside the cave, they felt an inexplicable calm settle over them. The storm raged on throughout the night, its lightning slicing through the gloom in bright, mesmerizing forks that threw dancing shadows across the cave walls. Locked in that enclosed space, Orion and Zelina found brief moments of sleep punctuated by the crashes of thunder and the crackle of intense static charges flickering through the minerals outside. Once, in the early hours, a blinding flash accompanied by an ear-splitting roar brought them both fully awake. Zelina's ears flattened in pain, prompting Orion to fold her gently in his arms, lending what comfort he could. In turn, she pressed a palm over his heart, feeling its steady, reassuring thud. Eventually, they drifted back to a light doze, entwined in a tangle of blanket, fur, and the tentative trust blossoming between them. By morning, the worst of the electromagnetic onslaught had waned, though the wind still howled. Sore and stiff, they gathered what little gear remained functional. Zelina's portable sensor kit was mostly operational, miraculously spared by the thick mineral deposits that had helped shield them. Orion's scanning device had partially shorted, displaying faint lines of static on its screen. Despite the damage, it still performed rudimentary sweeps, which was better than nothing. They ventured carefully to the cave's entrance. A swirl of red-brown dust blew in, stinging Orion's face. Beyond the sheltered overhang, the canyon floor looked scoured and littered with debris. Small rivulets of strange, ionized residue ran along the rock walls, a testament to how powerful the storm had been. Zelina sniffed at the air, her tail flicking. "We should check the ship. That's our lifeline. If it's dead, we'll need an alternate extraction plan." Grimacing, Orion nodded. "I'd suggest caution. The smugglers might have posted new patrols if they realized a storm was passing. But we can't delay too long. Our mission timeline doesn't stop just because we got stuck in a cave." The journey back took most of the morning. The canyon felt wilder than before, as if the thunderstorm had awakened something primal in the terrain. Boulders had shifted. Deposits of metallic dust shimmered in the patches of faint sunlight. More than once, Zelina paused, ears pricked and tail raised, listening for the slightest indication of intruders. But they encountered only silence and the occasional shuffle of small indigenous creatures scurrying from ledge to ledge. It was late afternoon when they caught sight of their vessel's landing site, or rather, what remained of it. The craft was still there, perched amid tall, jagged rocks, but arcs of scorched metal across its hull evidenced how fiercely the storm had raged. The entire left thruster assembly appeared blackened, and static sparks danced intermittently along the partially fried stabilizers. Zelina let out a low hiss, bounding up the ramp. She ran a diagnostic from the external panel. "Main power is offline. Auxiliary is showing partial function, but it might not be enough to take off safely." She glanced back at Orion, her muzzle drawn tight in worry. "We might be able to repair it if the internal systems are intact. Otherwise, we're stranded." Orion set down his gear with a weary sigh. "Let's see if the electronics inside are salvageable. If not, we'll improvise." He suppressed the sudden pang of anxiety that this would complicate their mission, and possibly trap them. The infiltration plan wouldn't mean much if they had no way to relay their findings to command. Still, he refused to let despair take hold. He recalled Zelina's words in the cave. "We make our own fortune by being prepared." That and the surge of closeness they'd shared gave him the resolve to keep moving forward. An hour later, they convened in the cockpit of the damaged ship, cross-referencing readouts on flickering screens. The interior smelled of burnt wiring, and small arcs of static leapt off any metal surface Orion touched. Zelina's nimble fingers danced across the controls, resetting what circuits she could. Outside the forward viewport, the canyon's dust-tinted sunlight filtered in, illuminating the cramped space that had been their first introduction to each other. "It's not as bad as it could be," she said at last, though her tone wasn't entirely optimistic. "The nav computer is partially fried, but some memory banks are intact. Engines are questionable. We can't break orbit, but a short-range flight might be possible if we reroute power and patch the worst damage." Orion blew out a breath. "We just need enough lift to relocate to a safer position. Maybe another canyon system that's off the smugglers' patrol routes. If we can at least manage that, we can refine our infiltration approach." Zelina nodded thoughtfully, tapping a cracked display that showed the region's topography. "If we can get to these coordinates," she said, zooming in on a spot that lay about 10 kilometers north, "we'll be close enough to proceed on foot but hidden from their main sensor sweeps, assuming we jam them again." Sitting back, Orion studied her face, noticing the faintest lines of strain around her eyes. He realized that, storm or no storm, the events of the past day had done more than wear them down physically. They'd gone from total strangers to something far more complex. The memory of her lips on his was fresh and potent. Even now, it made his pulse race. But there hadn't been time to parse those feelings or what they might mean beyond the urgency of survival. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly, keeping his voice low so it wouldn't carry through the corridor if any stealth modules were live enough to record. "I mean, really?" Zelina exhaled, her ears slanting slightly. "Tired, a little off balance. Last night in that cave, everything changed, but I don't regret it, if that's what you're asking." A warm flush hit Orion's cheeks, and he hoped the dim lighting masked it. "I don't regret it either." Then more gently, "Let's focus on the mission, and when it's all over, we'll figure out how to handle whatever's happening between us." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment. "Agreed." She looked as though she wanted to say more, but an alarm beep, one of the few functional sensors, cut in, snapping them to attention. Zelina's brows knitted. "It's a proximity alert. Something's approaching from the west." Instantly on edge, Orion darted to the small side viewport. A swirl of dust made visibility poor, but he could just make out a shadow, a vehicle of some sort gliding along the rocky floor. Grabbing a pair of macro binoculars, he zoomed in. A hoverbike, ridden by a single humanoid figure in dark attire. The markings on the bike were nondescript, typical of black market contraband. Zelina flicked the overhead switch to power down the cockpit lights. "We can't let them spot us," she said in a taut whisper. "We're vulnerable. If they radio in that a scout ship was hidden here, we'll have a swarm of smugglers on us within hours." Orion's pulse hammered. "Let's go silent. If we're lucky, they'll pass by, maybe scrounging for salvage from the storm. We watch. If they come too close, we deal with them quietly." She nodded. Together they crouched near the window, exchanging tense glances in the half-light. The possible confrontation ahead threatened to unravel every plan they'd painstakingly tried to keep afloat. While the infiltration was vital, they also had a personal stake in protecting this battered vessel. Because if they lost it, they lost any immediate chance at a shared future, no matter how unspoken its shape might be. The rider on the hoverbike stopped less than 100 meters from the vessel, dismounting in a swirl of dust. Helmet obscuring their features, they seemed to survey the terrain, perhaps noting the large scorch marks carved into the ground where the ship's engines had flared in its final descent. The figure circled the perimeter slowly, scanning with a handheld device. Zelina crouched by the cockpit door, a sidearm in hand. Orion stayed behind her, watching the intruder's movements through the partial cover of the forward console. He could sense Zelina's heightened tension. Her tail was taut, the fur bristled. If the stranger came closer, a confrontation would become inevitable and messy. They exchanged a single look that communicated everything. "If it comes to a fight, do it swiftly and quietly." Orion readied his own pulse pistol, though he hoped it wouldn't come to that. The stranger continued circling, stepping carefully over jagged rocks, pausing intermittently to consult a scanning unit. At one point, they took a few steps toward the ship's lowered ramp, too close for comfort. Zelina tensed. She began to rise, tail flicking in a slow, predatory rhythm. Just then the wind shifted, blowing dust directly into the stranger's path. They staggered slightly, adjusted their helmet's visor, and, after a minute of indecision, seemed to decide the battered scout was no threat. With a final glance, they retreated to the hoverbike and sped away into the swirling haze. Orion let out a long breath, realizing only then how tightly he'd been gripping his pistol. Zelina relaxed fractionally but didn't stand up straight until the bike's hum faded into the distance. That was too close, she muttered, rubbing a hand over her eyes. Let's not gamble on another visitor being that easily deterred. Nodding, Orion rose from his hiding spot. Agreed how we should attempt to patch up the ship's thruster issues and relocate now, or at least as soon as we can make it semi-airworthy. The infiltration data we have is time-sensitive, and we can't risk someone deciding our vessel looks worth salvaging. Immediately, they split into tasks. Zelina went outside to assess external hull damage, while Orion stayed in the cockpit to reroute auxiliary power. Time was of the essence, and though neither voiced it, they both felt an undercurrent of urgency that extended beyond the mission. Something intangible but potent sparked in that cave and still coursing through every glance they exchanged. Working under the scorching afternoon sun, Zelina pried open the thruster panels, letting out an exasperated hiss at the melted wiring and cracked power couplings. She radioed Orion through a short-range comm, praying the interference from the storm had diminished enough to allow stable transmissions. We can't fully repair this with the tools we have, she reported, but I can bypass the worst of it. If we're lucky, it'll hold for a short hop. Inside, Orion stared at the control boards. A few sparks popped, but it seemed the main console still responded to commands. I'll start powering up. Let me know when you're ready for a test ignition. As they worked, a soft sense of camaraderie enveloped them, sharpened by necessity. They were a team now, with no space for second-guessing or half-truths. Orion realized with a flush of pride and something warmer that they moved in tandem. His instructions, her feedback, a seamless call and response that promised success if fate allowed. It was a testament to how far they'd come in such a short span. Finally, Zelina's voice crackled through the comm. Try it. Orion carefully initiated a low-level ignition sequence. The thrusters sputtered, coughed, then roared to partial life. A wave of relief flooded him, enough juice to get airborne, albeit precariously. He hurried outside, finding Zelina covered in dust but wearing a determined expression. She flicked her tail when he approached, a signal of mutual triumph. They exchanged a smile, one that was purely theirs, before turning their attention to the next challenge, moving this battered craft to a discreet new location, then resuming their mission to infiltrate the smuggler's lair. The short flight to the secondary canyon was harrowing. Clouds of residual storm debris still hung in the air, swirling in mini whirlwinds that battered the craft. Zelina piloted with painstaking care, coaxing the damaged thrusters into stable output. Orion monitored the sensors, fingers dancing over the battered console. Every alarm that beeped sent a jolt of adrenaline through him, but Zelina's calm efficiency soothed his nerves. If anyone could handle this near-death contraption, it was her. They alighted on a wide, shaded ledge near the mouth of a twisting ravine. Tall spires of basalt rose around them, shielding the vessel from direct line of sight. The spot offered just enough clearance for a landing without scouring the ship's underside. When the thrusters finally powered down, they sat in tense silence, hearts hammering from the flight's near misses. Zelina took a moment to breathe, her head leaning against the back of the pilot seat. We made it, she murmured, half in disbelief. Her copper-red hair clung to her cheeks where sweat had matted it. The only sound was the rapid beat of her pulse in Orion's ears, a reminder of their shared relief and the risk they had just taken. Orion forced a shaky grin. You fly like it's an art form. I doubt many could have pulled that off. Her golden eyes flicked to him. Confidence in flight, like your skill at infiltration, comes from practice and necessity. But she paused, inhaling as if bracing herself. I'm glad you're here. Their gazes lingered, a silent acknowledgement of the deepening bond between them. Then Zelina cleared her throat and broke the spell. We should secure the perimeter and set up camp. If the smugglers have any roving patrols, we need an early warning system. Right, Orion agreed, quickly donning his gear. The two exited the craft into a pocket of quiet. A slight breeze rustled the basalt formations, and beyond that, the desert plateau stretched in dusty expanses. Together, they made a circuit around the ledge, placing small sensor beacons and calibrating them to alert them of approaching life forms or engines. Zelina's advanced hearing could pick up subtle cues, but the beacons served as a fallback if she was asleep or distracted. Once the perimeter was set, they gathered inside the ship's hold, now doubling as a makeshift command center, to review data. The drone footage from before the storm gave them a close-up look at the smuggler fortress, a hidden gate, convoys of unmarked vehicles, armed personnel. Zelina tapped the console. Their main threat is that automated turret in the canyon pass. If we can't neutralize it, any large-scale assault team we call in will face heavy casualties. Orion nodded. So we jam or sabotage? I'm leaning towards sabotage. If we jam and they detect the interference, they'll clamp down on security before an assault can strike. Zelina's tail flicked in agreement. Agreed, a well-placed explosive could do the job, but we'd have to get dangerously close. We also need solid proof of what they're trafficking. Just the drone footage might not cut it. Intelligence wants verification of the stolen tech's origin and its final destination. Orion leaned over the flickering, holographic map. We can slip in at dusk. The terrain around the fortress is irregular, lots of boulders and ridges that provide cover. We plan a small charge on the turret's central power relay. Then, if we can manage it, we slip inside to get actual code logs showing the smuggling routes. Zelina tapped her chin. Ambitious, but it might be our best shot. We'll upload the data to the Alliance network and let them muster a strike team. Meanwhile, we exfiltrate and guide the cavalry in. The plan sounded straightforward, but both knew that real conditions could deviate wildly from theory. They'd need perfect timing, especially with a half-damaged vessel as their only escape. Orion felt Zelina's sidelong gaze on him, measuring. "Let's rest," she said softly. "We have a few hours till dusk. Once darkness falls, it'll be showtime." Though the mission weighed heavily on them, Orion caught a flicker in her eyes that spoke of something more than nerves, of the subtle, pulsing undercurrent that had linked them since that stormy night. But with danger looming, they had to shelve personal questions for later. Survival, infiltration, and sabotage took precedence. They both silently resolved that if they did make it out intact, they would revisit the future they'd glimpsed in each other's arms. Night descended with startling swiftness, the sky blanketed by a dull red-brown hue that gradually deepened into charcoal. Zelina and Orion moved quietly through the labyrinth of basalt spires, guided by faint starlight and the discreet glow from Orion's minimal power scanner. They'd left most gear behind except for the essentials: infiltration tools, small explosive charges, sidearms, and Zelina's customized sensor kit. Speed, stealth, and minimal profile were crucial. A light wind whispered across the plateau, rustling grains of sand that glistened under the moon's eerie light. The route they'd chosen skirted the edges of the smuggler's stronghold, utilizing ridges and sunken trails carved by ancient water flows. Every so often, Zelina would lift a hand, signaling Orion to halt and listen. Her ears, perked and swiveling, detected distant hums of vehicles and faint chatter on the breeze. When it was safe, they pressed on. After nearly an hour of cautious travel, they reached the perimeter zone. From their vantage point, they observed floodlights illuminating a massive rock face. The hidden gate they'd seen in the drone footage was partially open, letting a small cargo hover lift pass inside. Armed guards were posted on a platform overhead. Orion spotted the turret, a sleek, deadly construct embedded in the canyon wall, its scanning sensors sweeping methodically. "Give me the micro-explosive," Zelina whispered, crouching behind a broad slab of rock. "I'll plant it on the turret's power hub while you provide lookout." Orion's hand hovered over the small packet of shaped charges. "Let me go. That turret is high up, angled near a catwalk. If your hearing picks up trouble, you can warn me faster than I'd detect it." She narrowed her eyes, tail flicking in protest. "You're not as agile as I am, though. The climb up to that turret's housing is precarious. I can sense loose footholds, shifting rocks. It's safer if I do it." He wanted to argue, to protect her by volunteering for the risk. But he also recognized that her specialized senses were exactly what made her the best candidate. Finally, he pressed his lips together and handed her the charges. "Just be careful." She offered a small, reassuring nod, the faintest quirk of a smile on her lips. I will. While Zelina began her careful ascent, Orion positioned himself behind a jagged boulder, scanning the guards. The turret's beam flickered overhead, a slow, rotating line that cast intermittent glares across the canyon floor. Orion's heart thrummed. Any slight misstep could trigger an alarm. He watched Zelina move with a feline grace, pressing herself close to the canyon wall. Now and then, she paused, ears rotating to pick up the faintest cracks of shifting rock before she proceeded. The climb took 10 agonizing minutes. Orion's pulse hammered, especially when the turret's sensor beams appeared to graze her position. But Zelina navigated the gap seamlessly, placing one hand after the other until she reached the panel at the turret's base. She slipped the shaped charge inside a narrow recess. Once armed, it blinked faintly, synchronized with a small detonator she carried. Success. She began her descent. Just as she dropped down a ledge, a faint noise drifted from behind the main gate. Voices and the clank of gear. Orion stiffened. If the guards decided to patrol the lower canyon, Zelina landed beside him with a soft thud, her eyes alive with urgency. We need to move, she mouthed. He took her hand and they crept further around the canyon's curve. They headed toward a secondary entry point, a side maintenance hatch they glimpsed on the drone footage. It was unguarded, overshadowed by the fortress's main thoroughfare. Precisely what they needed to slip inside. He pressed a small infiltration device to the hatch's control panel. Sparks fluttered as it worked to bypass the lock. A whispered beep signaled success, and the door slid open with a mechanical hiss. Giddiness and dread mingled in Orion's chest. Once inside, there would be no easy retreat if things went wrong. Zelina pressed a palm to the cool metal corridor, her gaze meeting his in the dimness. We get the proof, then we get out, she murmured. Orion nodded. And if all goes according to plan, that turret becomes scrap metal just in time for our strike team to arrive. He clutched her hand briefly, letting the warmth and steady determination in her touch ground him. Then, with weapons at the ready, they stepped into the corridor, sealing the hatch behind them. The infiltration had officially begun. Inside, the passage was dimly lit by flickering overhead panels that bathed everything in a sickly yellow glow. The air smelled of engine oil, dust, and the stale tang of recycled atmosphere. They moved in tandem, each footstep carefully placed. Zelina took point, her ears swiveling to catch distant echoes in the corridors. They encountered minimal resistance at first, just a couple of idle technicians pushing a hover cart stacked with nondescript crates. Zelina signaled Orion to pause, and they ducked behind a structural support. The technicians continued without noticing, disappearing down an adjoining hallway. Zelina exhaled softly, leaning close to Orion's ear. We're in luck. They must have a skeleton crew working inside. Most of their muscle is probably stationed at the main entrance or out on patrol. Let's try to find a control room or data center. Orion nodded, scanning the corridor intersections for any sign of a central facility. Up ahead, an illuminated arrow pointed toward Ops and Administration. They followed it cautiously, weaving past clusters of stacked crates. Some crates bore partial stenciling from major manufacturing firms, clear evidence these smugglers were handling stolen merchandise. Orion snapped a few quick photos with his portable device, hoping the power reserves would hold. Visual proof was a good start, but they needed shipping logs or digital manifests to confirm where this contraband was being funneled. They found the operations center behind a sealed door with a keypad lock. Zelina gestured for Orion to handle it, and he attached a small hacking module that whirred softly. It took nearly 30 excruciating seconds for the door to click open. Zelina slipped in first, weapon raised. The room was larger than expected. Multiple consoles lined one wall, with monitors displaying feed from security cameras and sensor arrays. Two individuals in mismatched uniforms stood by a large central table, reading off data pads. They seemed engrossed in conversation. Zelina's eyes flicked to Orion, a silent question. He grimaced, raising his pulse pistol. Subtlety was their friend here. If they fired a weapon, it could draw more guards. But they needed access to those terminals. Zelina motioned for him to circle left while she crept right. In a swift blur, Zelina pounced. She jabbed the muzzle of her sidearm into the first individual's back. Orion lunged at the second, clamping a hand over the woman's mouth to stifle her alarm. She dropped her datapad in a shock. Quiet, Zelina hissed, ears pulled back. No one needs to get hurt. We just want information. Orion pinned the second smuggler's arms, using zip ties to restrain her, then nodded to Zelina. The first prisoner submitted without a fight, trembling. Once both were secured and gagged, Zelina tested the main console. We've got logs here, she breathed, eyes flicking over the display. Multiple shipments, recently delivered, stolen from corporate shipments. Some are marked for black market distribution on frontier worlds. Orion quickly inserted a portable drive, initiating a data copy. His stomach nodded. This is huge, enough to bring down a major smuggling ring. Let's hope it's the smoking gun the Alliance needs. Zelina read further, tail lashing in agitation. They're also exporting experimental weapon mods, apparently traded from some unknown source. This goes deeper than I thought. They might have ties to illegal weapon dealers on the galactic fringe. They heard footsteps in the corridor. Orion froze. They'll notice something's up. We need to finish the download and get out. The progress bar on the console inched forward. With each passing second, Zelina's ears twitched nervously. Finally, the drive beeped, signaling completion. Orion yanked it free. Then he glanced at Zelina. We have what we need. Let's vanish before we overstay our welcome. They secured the door behind them, leaving the two smugglers bound. At best, that would buy them time. But an alarm was inevitable once someone found them. Clutching their prize, the digital evidence, Orion and Zelina navigated back through the twisting corridors, footsteps echoing in the hush. A new urgency coursed through them, fueled by the knowledge that they had to escape not just for the mission's sake, but for the promise of a shared tomorrow that had unexpectedly become precious. They reached the maintenance hatch without incident, but the moment Orion keyed it open, alarm klaxons blared from deeper within the fortress. Red lights pulsed along the hallway. Zelina shot Orion a meaningful glance. They found the prisoners. No more time for stealth. They slipped out into the night, hearts pounding. The turret overhead gleamed under the moonlight, still active. Down below, by the massive gate, they heard shouts and the rumble of heavy vehicles starting up. The fortress was waking to the breach. Zelina tapped a small remote on her belt, the detonator for the shaped charge. A muffled explosion rippled through the canyon, followed by a burst of sparks from the turret's base. The automated guns sputtered, swiveled wildly, and then went dark. A tremor went through the ground. Shouts in the distance turned panicked. "Turret's offline!" Zelina hissed, triumphant. "Now we have to run!" They sprinted across open ground, weaving around boulders. Pulse shots cracked the air behind them, bright lances sizzling into the rocks. Orion grit his teeth, pushing his lungs to the limit. They were out in the open. Prime targets. One well-aimed shot could end it all. But Zelina, agile as ever, bobbed and ducked, leading them around a twisting path that afforded partial cover. A hover truck roared up from behind, searchlights sweeping the terrain. Orion caught the glow out of the corner of his eye. "Incoming!" he shouted, diving for a depression in the ground. Zelina flung herself beside him. The truck's high beams sliced across the rocky ridge, but the pair remained hidden in the crevice. The vehicle sped on, presumably heading toward the fortress to investigate the explosion. "Go now," Zelina urged, tugging Orion's sleeve. They scrambled to their feet and continued the mad dash back toward the basalt spires. Alarms and searchlights crisscrossed behind them, but with each passing moment, the distance to their hidden ship grew shorter. At last, they spotted the craft silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Orion's heart soared with relief. This battered, half-functional vessel was a lifeline, the only way to deliver the damning evidence. Zelina paused briefly, scanning the horizon with her hyper-acute senses. Satisfied that no immediate patrol was upon them, she waved Orion forward. They barreled up the ramp and secured the hatch. Orion dashed to the cockpit, Zelina hot on his heels. "Activate the thrusters," she yelled, sinking into the co-pilot seat as Orion initiated the startup sequence. The damaged engines coughed, stuttered, then roared to life, sputtering sparks. One of the monitors blinked, showing a distant cluster of headlights, multiple hover trucks racing over the plateau. Orion clenched his jaw. "Hold together, old girl. Just hold together a little longer." Zelina gripped the controls, coaxing the craft into a shuddering liftoff. At first, it wobbled precariously, nearly scraping a basalt pillar. Then, with a shriek of stressed metal, the scout ship rose above the canyon floor. They veered east, pushing the thrusters for every bit of speed they could muster. Below, the smuggler convoy skidded to a halt, searchlights stabbing the sky, but too late to prevent the ship from disappearing into the darkness. For now, they had evaded capture, racing away with vital intel that would dismantle a criminal network. But as they soared over the rugged moonscape, an unspoken tension shimmered between Orion and Zelena. In the aftermath of adrenaline and near disaster, the spark they'd shared in that cave had only grown stronger. Neither could guess how drastically their lives were about to shift. Yet both suspected that this mutual bond, still unnamed, would soon face even greater challenges than the ones they'd just escaped. Their battered scout craft limped across the lunar skies, carrying Orion and Zelena toward an Alliance outpost situated on a nearby planetoid. Despite the near-constant wail of damaged systems, Orion felt a rush of triumph. They possessed the smuggler data that would crush a vast criminal network. Zelena sat beside him, coaxing the damaged thrusters to maintain stable flight. It took all her piloting skill just to keep the ship from tumbling into the planetoid's thin atmosphere. Outside, streaks of cosmic radiation glimmered against a star-flecked backdrop, a silent reminder of the unforgiving void through which they traveled. Eventually, a squat, circular structure loomed on the horizon. Alpha Bastion, a small but strategically located Alliance installation. The outpost landing control signaled them to proceed, and Zelena forced the thrusters into a final burst, wrestling the controls with tense resolve. Sparks spat from the console as they touched down on one of the external pads. The vessel's landing gear clamped onto the metal surface with a screech that left both of them breathing hard. A handful of base personnel ran out to meet them, carrying diagnostic tools and medical kits. Commander Tenmore Reeve, a towering figure with short, pale hair and sharp, analytical eyes, stood at the forefront. He waved them forward, expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. Orion descended the boarding ramp first, helmet under one arm, shoulders aching from the flight's stress. Zelena followed, her tail held low but stiff in exhaustion. She gave a respectful nod to the commander. "Report," Commander Reeve demanded, though his tone held underlying warmth. "We had your distress signals, then lost you for hours during that electromagnetic storm. We feared the worst." Zelena handed over her data drive. "We infiltrated the smuggler fortress as ordered, sir. This drive contains logs, manifests, and enough visual evidence to confirm the ring's scale. They're trading in stolen corporate tech, weapon mods, possibly even contraband from outside recognized territory." Reeves' gaze flicked from the battered ship to the exhausted pair. "Good work. I'll have my intel specialists assess it immediately. In the meantime, get yourselves to medical for a full check. That was quite a mission, by the looks of you and the state of that craft." Relief washed over Orion, though a pang of nerves gnawed at him. He recalled the storm-swept night in the cave, the closeness, the surge of feeling that they hadn't yet fully discussed. Now, back in Alliance territory, he wondered how their fledgling bond would survive real-world scrutiny, or if it might become complicated by official regulations. They followed Reeve inside, the outpost corridors lit with the harsh, sterile glow of overhead fluorescence. A wave of cool, filtered air greeted them, in stark contrast to the scorching dryness of the moon's surface. A few wide-eyed troopers offered them salutes, likely having heard rumors about the infiltration. Zelena's exotic silhouette drew more than a few curious stares. Corel specialists were rare sights at distant outposts. Inside the medical bay, a bustle of medics hurriedly ushered them onto examination beds. The physician, Dr. Shavak, had bright, intelligent eyes and scaled skin that shimmered in the room's fluorescent light. She wasted no time scanning them for injuries. Orion squinted at the blinking overhead medical scanner, mind drifting between relief at the mission's success and a sense of anticipation that he couldn't quite define. Meanwhile, Zelena gazed into empty space, her tail lying unmoving beside her. An unspoken question flickered across her features, as though she, too, wondered if the changes they'd felt in that cave might manifest in ways neither had dared to imagine. Dr. Shavak's thorough check started with Orion, scanning for signs of radiation exposure or physical trauma from their bumpy ride. Aside from bruises, mild dehydration, and traces of electromagnetically induced fatigue, He was given a mostly clean bill of health. Then the doctor turned to Zelina, assisting her onto a diagnostic platform. Orion hovered nearby, arms folded, concern twisting in his gut. Your vitals are elevated, Dr. Shabak remarked, eyes flitting over a floating holographic display that showed Zelina's physiology. But that could be from stress. I see some anomalies in your hormone levels, though. Is this typical for a Chiral under mission strain? Zelina hesitated. Orion recalled the way she had pressed her hand to her abdomen once or twice during their journey back, almost unconsciously. Maybe, she said uncertainly, her ears twitching. We tend to experience heightened adrenal responses after close calls. Could that be what you're detecting? The doctor studied the readouts more intently. Possibly. However, I'm seeing a spike in certain markers that suggest a more specialized process. Do you mind if I run a second pass? A chill rippled through Orion. From the corner of his eye, he saw Commander Reeve waiting outside the observation window, likely expecting a routine post-mission clearance. As Dr. Shavak performed a deeper scan, Zelina's ears flattened against her head. Part caution, part apprehension. The readout glowed in swirling patterns, highlighting multiple elevated hormone bands. When Dr. Shavak finally spoke, her voice was low and tinged with professional astonishment. Zelina, I'm picking up a clear indication that your body has initiated a reproductive phase. Are you aware of any reason this might happen now? A stunned hush filled the bay. Orion's throat went dry. They exchanged a single, unguarded glance, and he could see the truth dawning in her wide, golden eyes. That night in the cave, a closeness that had transcended mere survival. Could it really have led to this, so swiftly? He recalled the stories he'd heard about certain alien species who were biologically adaptable, but had never connected that rumor to the Chiral. Dr. Shavak must have seen the look between them. She shifted, giving them a moment of privacy by stepping to the console. I'll finalize these scans, she murmured, trying to sound composed but clearly fascinated. I need to confirm some data about chiral biology. As soon as the doctor was out of earshot, Zelina exhaled in a tremulous whisper. Orion, my species can sometimes form cross-species bonds when certain compatibility markers align. I never thought it would happen with a human. Her tail curled protectively around her leg, a gesture he recognized as anxiety. But we both sensed something that night, didn't we? His heart hammered. Yes, I just never realized it could have consequences so soon. His own voice was shaky, caught between shock and a curious, profound excitement. They stared at each other, countless questions roiling in the silence. Before they could speak further, Dr. Shabak approached again with the test results. Her scaled brow creased in amazement. From these biomarkers, I can confirm you're in the early stages of pregnancy. Given the genetic signatures, it appears the father is human. She glanced at Orion, her expression carefully neutral. Congratulations. I think, this is to my knowledge unprecedented. Zelina's breath caught, and Orion instinctively took her hand. In that split second, the gravity of the situation crashed over them. Two field operatives from vastly different species, bound by an intimate encounter that had just changed their lives forever. How would Commander Reeve respond? How would the Alliance? Yet beyond those worries, an undeniable wave of warmth and wonder rose in Orion's chest. They were going to have children, or puppies, or pups, or some new and miraculous combination of the two species' legacies. Commander Reeve's reaction was swift. He summoned them to his office for an immediate briefing. The large oval chamber exuded Spartan efficiency, with only a few ornamental displays of past campaign medals. Reeves stood behind a sleek metal desk, arms crossed, while a secure holoscreen glowed before him. He looked up as they entered, eyes flicking from Zelina's tense posture to Orion's pale but resolute expression. I received Dr. Shavak's report, the commander began, voice neutral but laced with an undercurrent of concern. This is rather extraordinary news. I trust neither of you anticipated this outcome? Zelina nodded once, tail swishing anxiously. No, sir. It's an unforeseen development. Chiral biology includes an adaptive fertility trait, but it's rare. I wasn't aware a human-chiral pairing could even be compatible. Reeve paused, clearly processing. Then he let out a measured breath, leaning forward. I'm not here to condemn or to pry. Personally, I believe consenting adults can handle relationships as they see fit, regardless of species. But we must consider the ramifications. This is no small matter. You two just became a subject of monumental interest. To scientists, to your own people, to possible adversaries who might see you as a vulnerability or an asset. Orion's jaw tightened. The notion that their future family might be swamped by political or scientific agendas made his stomach churn. Sir, I want to protect Zelina and our offspring, he said firmly. We didn't plan this, but we're committed to facing it together. A faint smile tugged at one corner of Reeves' mouth. I expected no less. For now, your infiltration data is being analyzed, and we'll coordinate a strike to dismantle the smuggling ring. That part of your mission is concluded, exceptionally, I might add, but I'm transferring you both from frontline duties to an advisory role here at Alpha Bastion. It will keep you under closer protection and out of harm's way, at least until we know more. Zelina exhaled in something like relief. Thank you, sir. Reeve tapped a small interface on his desk. That said, you're going to have visitors, Chiral diplomatic envoys, possibly genetic research teams. We can't stonewall them all. It's too big of an event. But I'll do what I can to ensure your privacy is respected. After dismissing them, Reeve gave Orion a moment to linger. In a low voice, the commander spoke. I don't envy your position, Dex, but as your CO and as someone who's seen many interspecies partnerships, I urge you, stand by her. The Alliance can be supportive, but bureaucracy can also be ruthless. You two will need each other's strength. Stepping out of the office, Orion found Zelina waiting, head bowed as she traced her claws along a seam in her uniform sleeve. When she looked up, their eyes locked, and the tension broke in a rush of shared relief. We're not in trouble, she breathed. Not exactly, but our lives have definitely changed. Orion reached for her hand, the same way he had in the cave. This time, he felt a gentle, pulsing warmth in her grip. We'll handle it, he promised, voice shaky but sincere. Together. They walked toward their new quarters, the bright hallway seeming surreal after the dusty canyons and violent storms. Neither spoke of the uncertain future, but each felt an anchoring calm in the other's presence. In the swirl of new responsibilities and looming public curiosity, at least their bond felt steadfast, though they could not yet know just how many tests that bond would endure in the weeks to come. The newly assigned living space was more spacious than Orion expected, tucked at the end of a quiet corridor with minimal foot traffic. A real bed, a modest sitting area, and a window overlooking the outpost's exterior landing pad, far more comfort than a typical field operative's bunk. Zelina circled the main room, tail swishing thoughtfully. Even so, Orion noted she seemed uneasy, as though the walls themselves whispered of the changes unfolding. He closed the door behind them, setting aside his gear. How do you feel? He asked gently. Zelina sank onto the edge of the bed, pressing a hand to her abdomen. Her copper-red hair fell forward, partially obscuring her expressive eyes. Nervous, overwhelmed, she admitted, looking up. The fact that my body already shows signs, it means I'm further along than I realized. Chiral gestation is relatively short. Our biology accelerates once a pregnancy begins, especially in cross-species scenarios. The changes can happen fast. Orion approached slowly, taking a seat beside her. He recalled the hush in the medical bay, the swirl of data about hormone levels and genetic markers. It still felt unbelievable. So, how soon? He asked quietly, an edge of awe coloring his tone. She drew a calming breath. Typical chiral pregnancies last about 6 months. But with cross-species adaptation, that window could vary. It might be faster. I can sense the changes inside me. It's like my body is fueling growth at double speed. He reached out, tentatively resting a hand atop hers. I wish we had more privacy, he murmured. We should be free to process this without outsiders breathing down our necks. Zelina offered a tired smile. Commander Reeve is doing his best, but we're not naive. There will be intense scrutiny. This has never happened before, at least not in modern documented history. Scientists, my own clan leaders, curious onlookers. Our children, her voice caught on the word, They'll be the first recognized Chiral human hybrids. Child or children? The plural sank into Orion's mind, reminding him of rumors about multiple births in certain alien species. He rubbed the back of his neck, pushing aside a pang of adrenaline. Let them come. We'll handle it. My only concern is making sure you're all healthy and safe. A new tension flickered across her face. I appreciate that, but Chiral mothers can get protective, sometimes aggressively so. I'm not sure how that'll translate for me when I'm part of a cross-species bond. She glanced down at their hands, entwined now. It might be overwhelming for us both. Gently, he guided her face up, meeting her gaze. Zelina, I don't have all the answers, but I know I care about you and about this life we've somehow created. We'll learn together. If you push me away, I'll come back. If you feel you might hurt me or yourself, we'll figure out how to handle it. We're in this. No backing out. Her eyes shone with gratitude and a hint of awe. You're braver than I give ya credit for, Orion. He brushed a stray lock of her copper hair aside. I'm just determined, and I had a pretty good teacher in stealth and perseverance, if you recall. A fleeting smile passed between them. In that moment, the world's curiosity felt distant, overshadowed by the quiet, heartfelt reality that they were no longer just two operatives on a mission. They were, in some inexplicable way, a family. The days that followed were a blur of medical tests, diplomatic entreaties, and awkward congratulatory messages from colleagues who had no idea how to handle this unprecedented situation. Dr. Shayovak supervised Zelina's checkups every other day, charting the hormonal fluctuations and scanning the growing presence within her. The base's staff quickly adopted a policy of polite curiosity. Nobody wanted to push too hard, but they all recognized something historic was unfolding. More challenging, however, were the visitors from the Chiral delegation. They arrived on a sleek cruiser, bearing robes of a deep forest green trimmed with swirling gold patterns. Leading them was Elder Maliri, an imposing figure with graying fur at her temples and long, tapered ears that signified her lofty status among the clans. Orion's first impression was that she carried herself with the regal calm of someone used to reverence. Her every movement was measured, her tail erect in a formal posture. She requested a private meeting with Zelina, a matter of tradition and kinship, as she put it, but Orion was invited as well, a bold statement in Chiral terms. The three convened in a small conference room near the outpost's administrative wing. Orion hovered behind Zelina, trying to project calm even as nerves jangled inside him. Elder Maliri fixed Zelina with an unwavering gaze. Young one, your situation has stirred quite a commotion among the clans, she began, her voice low and resonant. Rarely do we witness cross-species conception, and never before with the human. The council has asked me to assess your well-being and to formally bless this union if it proves stable. A flicker of relief crossed Zelina's face. She had feared condemnation. Thank you, Elder. I wasn't certain how the Chiral elders would respond. Maliri's tail made a graceful dip, a respectful nuance. We prize healthy growth and adaptability. Your children, represent a remarkable evolution of that principle. She then turned her keen gaze on Orion, examining him from head to toe. You must be the human father, Orion Dex, yes? Tell me, do you understand the significance of a Chiral mother carrying your offspring? He swallowed, resisting the urge to fidget under her scrutiny. I'm learning, Elder. I know my role is to provide emotional and physical support. Our alliance sees these children as a diplomatic milestone, but to me, they're our family. A subtle nod of approval touched Maliri's features. Well spoken. In our traditions, a partner who acknowledges the sanctity of new life is already worthy of respect. Zelina, does he offer you the protective bond you require? Zelina's ears lifted, her gaze sliding to Orion with warmth. Yes, Elder. In the field, he was loyal and brave. Now that our relationship has shifted, he's shown nothing but devotion. Maliri folded her arms. Good. Then the council will not interfere. Instead, we wish to bestow the ancient blessing, an old rite that acknowledges the creation of hybrid lines. It was thought mostly ceremonial in modern times, but this scenario revives its original purpose. Though Elder Maliri maintained composure, Orion sensed her genuine excitement. Perhaps her stoic exterior masked the same sense of awe that everyone felt. With the formality settled, Maliri stepped closer to Zelina, brushing a gentle hand along her temple. "May your path be free of hardship," she intoned in the musical tones of her native language. "And may the next generation who shall walk in two worlds bring unity and strength to all." The ceremony itself was set for the following day to be conducted within the base's courtyard. It would mark a public and symbolic acceptance of this new family. Orion glanced at Zelina, who looked both relieved and a touch vulnerable. The swirl of tradition, politics, and personal feeling was intense. Yet in Elder Maliri's blessing, they both sensed a promise. The children would be welcomed with open arms by the Kyrell, not treated as an anomaly. The ancient blessing took place under the harsh lights of the outpost's open-air assembly space. By all accounts, it was the first time this solemn Kyrell ceremony had ever been performed on an Alliance base. Soldiers and staff in mismatched uniforms gathered at a respectful distance, murmuring in hushed tones. Elder Maliri and two other Kyrell dignitaries set up small ceremonial braziers that emitted fragrant smoke laced with aromatic herbs. The courtyard's normally barren atmosphere took on a surreal, almost mystical air. Zelina, clad in a simple yet elegant wrap that revealed the soft contours of her slightly swollen abdomen, stood before Maliri, who gently touched her brow. Orion stood at Zelina's side, unsure whether to bow or remain still. Fortunately, Zelina had coached him briefly in the rudimentary gestures. When Maliri raised a carved wooden staff, Orion followed Zelina in placing one hand over his heart and lowering his gaze, a sign of reverence for the rite. A hush descended. Maliri's voice resonated through the courtyard, blending the lilting cadence of Kyrell's speech with translations in common. She spoke of ancient bonds formed in dire times, of how the Kyrell had once survived by forging alliances that transcended bloodlines, adopting adaptability as their greatest strength. The final lines praised the union of two souls from different worlds, calling for prosperity and long life for the children who would bear both legacies. In that moment, Orion felt a profound stillness settle over him. The swirling anxieties about alliance politics, media attention, and scientific meddling receded. He saw only Zelina's luminous eyes, reflecting the brazier's dancing flames, and felt the gentle rise of her breathing as she carried what would soon be their offspring. A ripple of hushed laughter passed through the assembled base personnel when the Kyrell dignitaries finished chanting and offered silent bows to the couple. Even Commander Reeve, observing quietly at the edge of the crowd, wore an uncharacteristic smile. After the ceremony, Maliri laid a furred hand on Orion's shoulder. "Welcome to the clan, Orion Dex," she said quietly, her gaze surprisingly tender. "Though you are not Kyrell by birth, you share in our next generation. That is bond enough." He bowed again, a lump tightening his throat. "Thank you, Elder." Zelina, meanwhile, received gentle hand presses from the other dignitaries, gestures of blessing and acceptance. Although her tail occasionally flicked in what Orion recognized as lingering nerves, she exuded a calm serenity. She caught Orion's eye, and her lips curved in a soft, private smile that said everything. Despite the swirling changes, they stood together. When the crowd dispersed, the base staff and visiting Kyrell filtered away, many offering whispered congratulations. Commander Reeve approached, arms folded, but a pleased look on his face. "That was quite the spectacle," he commented. "In my years, I've never seen such a ceremony performed off-world. I hope it brings you both peace and support." Zelina inclined her head. "It does, sir. Thank you for facilitating it." Orion inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp air that still smelled faintly of ceremonial herbs. For the first time, he felt an unburdened sense of hope. The ancient, formal blessing had sealed not just a cultural acceptance, but his own resolve to be the partner Zelina needed. Soon, however, events would move faster than either of them could anticipate. Life was about to accelerate in ways no ceremony could fully prepare them for. Over the next few months, the base bustled with activity, coordinating the strike that Orion and Zelina's intel had enabled. Reports came in daily about smugglers arrested, contraband seized, entire warehouses liberated. Orion assisted from behind a holodesk, analyzing infiltration logs and guiding troopers through terrain he and Zelina had scouted. Meanwhile, Zelina used her keen chiral senses to help calibrate sensor grids, ensuring no hidden pockets of criminals escaped notice. The operation was a resounding success, and as their co-commanders had hoped, the data they had risked their lives to obtain dismantled the ring at its core. Yet overshadowing all these achievements was Zelina's rapidly progressing pregnancy. True to her instincts, her belly swelled in half the time a typical human would expect. Dershavik confirmed the presence of multiple fetal signatures, three at first, then a fourth revealed on a subsequent scan. Orion nearly fainted when the doctor calmly mentioned quadruplets. Zelina took the news with a measured exhale, though her tail bristled with equal parts excitement and trepidation. The base adapted quickly. Their living quarters expanded into a larger suite with additional amenities for comfort. Soft cushions replaced standard-issue chairs, and the lights were dimmed to accommodate Zelina's heightened sensitivity. A steady stream of well-wishers dropped by with gifts, from warm blankets to custom-crafted items, for the hybrid pups that were soon to be born. Some of the gestures were sincere, others purely curious, but Orion and Zelina accepted them all graciously. Day by day, Orion watched Zelina's transformation in awe. Her steps grew slower, her appetite more pronounced. At times, her mood swung unpredictably, moments of joyous purring followed by bouts of fretful anxiety. She confessed that the maternal instincts of the Chiral were flaring stronger than she'd ever imagined, making her territorial and sometimes suspicious of strangers. Through it all, Orion stayed by her side, offering midnight snacks, back rubs, and gentle reassurances whenever a wave of doubt or discomfort hit. He even learned to shape the nest-like arrangement of cushions she insisted on, layering them in a precise pattern that satisfied her sense of proper nesting. Though it seemed strange to him, he found a quiet wonder in adjusting each pillow until she purred her approval. Commander Reeve respected their needs, assigning Orion only minimal duties, and ensuring no one disturbed Zelina without permission. Even Elder Maliri checked in occasionally via hologram, voicing pride at how well Zelina balanced her physical changes with her duties. The Elder joked that soon they'd have to rename Orion the human who outnested the best of the Chiral, which drew a startled laugh from him and made Zelina's ears twitch in amusement. Finally, Dr. Shavak predicted the birth would come within days. The base's medical ward outfitted a private maternity chamber, mixing advanced Alliance technology with the warm, natural touches the Chiral delegates suggested. Soft lighting, low hums of comforting sound frequencies, even an old herbal infusion that was said to ease the birthing process. Anticipation electrified the outpost. No one had witnessed, let alone assisted with, the birth of a hybrid litter like this. On a quiet morning with the sky outside tinted by the planetoid's rising sun, Zelina awoke Orion with a sharp gasp. A deep pang gripped her, and she clutched the blanket so tight her claws tore small holes. Orion, heart-pounding, summoned the medical team. Within minutes, they rushed Zelina to the prepared chamber, the swirling reality of the month's buildup culminating in a moment of awe, terror, and profound hope. Looking back on this extraordinary journey, it's clear that the most powerful force at play was never technology, politics, or danger. It was the unbreakable bond formed between two unlikely partners. Through hidden caves and perilous missions, they found genuine trust and understanding, proving that love and teamwork can bridge even the widest gaps of species and background. As the smuggling ring fell and new life arrived amid excitement and anticipation, they discovered hope in the midst of adversity, hope for a family that would transcend every boundary once believed insurmountable. From my own perspective, this story reminds me how resilience, compassion, and a willingness to embrace the unknown can spark miracles nobody thought possible. I invite you all to share your thoughts. Which twist surprised you the most? How do you feel about alliances formed across deep divides? Let's keep the conversation going. Leave a comment with your insights, opinions, or personal experiences. Your voice matters, and I can't wait to read what you have to say.